Hello, and welcome to another episode of Building a Coaching Business in Motherhood. I'm Gillian, and the episode you are about to hear was originally posted on my Confident Coaching podcast feed. So you will hear me introduce the podcast on that feed in the beginning of this episode. With that, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode of Building a Coaching Business in Motherhood. Welcome to this episode of currently the Confident Coaching Podcast, but you may also be listening to this on my new podcast feed, which, as I'm recording this, does not exist yet, but it is going to be specifically focused around mothers that are nutrition and fitness coaches, or soon to be mothers, because this episode is about some of the tips that I wish I'd had about planning maternity leave as a nutrition and fitness coach. And full disclosure, I planned a 4-month maternity leave, and I'm lucky enough, I live in Spain, so I did have a little bit of financial support from the government because we have paid maternity leave here. I know that's not the case as a freelancer in every country. But that said, regardless of the amount that I was given by the Spanish government, which was not very much, this is really what I had kept in mind planning my maternity leave, because I think it is very different when you are planning maternity leave as someone that has a team, someone that is more of like a high level, just sort of CEO role versus someone that is coaching clients, someone that is doing all different parts of the business where you are the marketing team, the content team, the accounting team. You have all of these different hats to wear in your business, and planning a maternity leave when maybe your only team member is like a personal assistant or maybe an assistant coach is very different than when you are planning a maternity leave and you have a full team behind you. And so let's talk about a few of the things that I would really encourage you to think about if you are considering maternity leave. The first thing I want to talk about is you do not know how you are going to feel. And I wish someone had told me this, because I had what I thought was this plan for getting back into work and when I would get back into work and what that was going to feel like and what my motivation was going to be like. And you do not know how you are going to feel when this baby gets here. And this is even if it's not your first child. I am working with coaches who have now had their second or their third baby, and they felt different with this new child than they did with their first or their second. And I think even if you've done this before, yes, you kind of like know how to care for a baby more than a first-time mother, but you are not going to know ahead of time how you're going to feel, which really brings me to give yourself a maternity leave. I know a lot of nutrition and fitness coaches feel very anxious about the idea of like actually taking time off, and they worry about like clients leaving and huge income dips. And I've heard of nutrition and fitness coaches literally working like from the hospital, responding to clients after having a baby. Of course, that is your choice, but I would highly encourage you that like think about how to actually give yourself some space to not be responsible for anything related to work. And that takes a plan, that takes communication with your clients, and it also takes understanding of what does it look like for you financially, which you might need to bring your partner in on this discussion and be really, really clear about, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what it might mean for us financially. Like, does this work for our family? And I think sometimes we avoid these conversations. Please have this conversation. The second thing I really want to be clear about is like, we often think about what needs to be done, but I want you to think about what's okay to leave undone, right? One of the things that I really work on with the moms that I support in business is deprioritizing, because especially when we are a solo business owner, it sometimes feels like everything always needs to get done. And we constantly have like busy work, busy work, busy work. And specifically when we are planning a maternity leave, be really clear about like, if I do not do this for 8 weeks or 12 weeks, what will actually happen to my business? And I think this is important because then we can actually hone in on what can I do better now that I've actually let go of trying to do everything. And so that means that you might be preparing like less content, but that content is going to be more well made because you're not just trying to pump shit out, right? So I would really encourage you to consider the impact if you are creating content, because a lot of the time it is about maintaining some type of social media presence or, nurturing people even though we are not technically online. And we need to think about the impact of the content you create. So for example, it might make more sense to put your effort into creating a few well-crafted podcasts or like longer form pieces of content, because that content can be repurposed into emails and social media posts. It has a longer shelf life than just an Instagram post, right? So it might make more sense to put your energy in preparing for maternity leave into long-term content that you can then repurpose. And sometimes AI can be really helpful for this. And I will have a podcast coming soon on how I use AI as a mother to help me with my business. That may make more sense than prepping a bunch of short form content. And maybe you're like, oh, well, I don't have a podcast. That's fine. Maybe you don't have a podcast. Maybe you don't have a YouTube channel. Maybe you don't have any of that. That might be something, let's say we were to work together, we might consider, does it make sense for you to have that? Or do you have perhaps an email list that you aren't using, and maybe email is your long form content, or maybe Substack is your long form content? Basically, what we want to be thinking of is like, what is going to be longer lasting that you can actually repurpose to be part of that sort of like shorter term content that recycles really quickly, like Instagram. And the third thing I want you to think about is, how do you want to handle your finances? And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but you might want to, hey, maybe I just want to really work on having a couple big launches, or bringing in more money before I go on maternity leave so I know I have enough to cover me. Or maybe you're like, hey, I actually want to have I want to have income coming in while I'm on maternity leave. And this is something that we need to consider. Maybe it's a hybrid, but being really intentional with it. For example, I have a coach that I'm working with now that for her maternity leave, she had set up a long time ago a workout program, a workout app. So she had like a little over $1,000, I believe, coming in while she was on maternity leave because she'd been working on that for a while. One of the things that I had when I was on maternity leave was I had payments coming in from a launch that I did during pregnancy for my Mindful Eating Essentials course. So I had payment plans for that course that were still coming in that covered part of my maternity leave. That was really helpful. And I think one of the things that we need to consider for nutrition and fitness coaches is, how do we want to handle this with our coaching clients? And there are a bunch of different ways you can handle this. It's going to depend on the type of coaching you offer, the relationship that you have with your coaching clients, the way that you run your business. And this is, again, something that if I were to work with someone, we would define what actually makes sense for them and what does the communication need to look like around that. But we want to consider, how am I setting myself up to come back to my coaching clients if that's what I want to do? And I say if that's what I want to do, because sometimes coming back to, we don't know how we're going to feel post maternity leave, but we can kind of do things to support ourselves like before that, is you might recognize, ooh, I maybe don't want to have a full load of one-on-one coaching clients. So maybe what I want to do is look at setting up a structure for a group program, or trying to create something that maybe is a little bit more of a self-paced course before I go on maternity leave. So I can either launch that before, or I can launch that when I come back. We want to ask, is there something that you can be selling in the background? Sometimes that is so much as, maybe you already have content that you have created in the past and it just needs to be repackaged as something that can be evergreen, or something that you can launch before you go on maternity leave and have payment plans coming in for. You also want to consider, do I want to have clients potentially prepay before I go on maternity leave? Do I want to put them on some type of maintenance plan so that I have a certain level of income coming in? How do I want to build up potentially a wait list if I do know that I want to continue working intensely with one-on-one coaching clients? As I said before, I had payment plans coming in. I also had clients on a maintenance rate, and I had a wait list going into my maternity leave of clients that I was actually really excited to start working with, and a few mentorship spots sold ahead of time. And This brings me to the next thing, which really kind of is connected to what I said at the very beginning, which is you don't know how you're going to feel, but also you are going to overestimate what you're capable of on return to work. There is going to be a part of you as a nutrition and fitness coach, as maybe an eldest daughter, maybe a perfectionist, maybe someone that carries the weight of the world on their shoulders, someone that gets a lot of ego validation out of their business, there's going to be a part of you that overestimates what you are capable of and what you'll want to do when you come back to work. And you might even be like, well, I'm going to come back sooner than I actually want to. And so I did a staggered return and I would do that again. I would 100% do a staggered return to work. And what that looked like is I started back up working after I think it was like 8 weeks after having my son. And I had already taken 3 weeks off or 4 weeks off before having my son. I started working with my long-term clients. So clients that I already knew. We had an amazing rapport. I was excited to chat with them. It feels great to work with them. I started with them first. I ran a launch that I had been planting seeds for months before maternity leave. So that was actually the easiest and one of the most successful launches I've ever had because I had been sort of seeding for this launch before I even went on maternity leave. And I had some of the content I'd created, which was long form content, was leading people to the interest list for this course. And so what I prepped was all towards the intention of getting people into this program when I came back from maternity leave. And I came back to a few really, really strong months financially because I had that sort of planned out ahead of time. And this brings me to the final thing I want you to consider is that you might want to reconsider your income model or your business model once you have a baby. A lot of nutrition and fitness coaches that come back to their business after having a baby kind of ask themselves, like, do I really want to be taking on this many one-on-one coaching clients? Now, I think sometimes we believe that selling a group coaching program is easier than selling one-on-one coaching. That is not true. There is a scenario in which it can be easier. It needs to be very, very specifically solving a problem, and the messaging needs to be very honed in, which is absolutely possible. But maybe before baby, you had like 30 one-on-one coaching clients and you were making a great income. But your emotional capacity, your motivation, your energy is going to shift after you have a baby, at least for the first X amount of time. I don't want to give amount of time because for some people it's 6 months, for some people it's 6 years, right? But you may not have the same energetic or emotional capacity for 30 one-on-one coaching clients when you come back from maternity leave. And this is why I think having a mentor that understands motherhood and understands nutrition and fitness coaching is so important, because we want to be able to make choices about what does my business model look like if I do want to adjust it, and what are my options? How do I make that happen in a way that doesn't feel like I'm constantly trying to get myself to live up to what I was doing before I had a baby, but I'm actually a completely different person now. And so I want to finish with this. You're never going to get this time back with your child, whether this is your first child, second child, or fifth child, whether or not you've taken maternity leave before, whether you live somewhere that doesn't offer a government supported maternity leave, you are never going to get this time back. And I don't say this as like, you need to stay with your baby, but it's so worth looking at how do I adapt my business to support me while I can also really give my time and energy and my focus to this little one that is like every day you're like, this is the littlest you're going to be. And I think having at least a little bubble of time where you don't have to think about check-ins or due dates or payments coming through or, DMing people, having that bubble of time is so, so, so valuable. And that might mean like being really strategic about the work that you do ahead of time to build a financial cushion and to build space. And it might also mean looking at how you leverage what you've already built in your business to create extra income. If this is something that you want support figuring out for yourself, whether you are planning maternity leave or even if you got back from maternity leave 6 months ago or 3 years ago, and you're like, wait, I feel like I could really use help from someone that understands my industry, but also understands what it's like to be a mother to help me figure this stuff out. I am offering, if you have never worked with me before, I am offering a $99 consult call. I call it a capacity call. If you would like to take advantage of that, that gives us an hour to really dive into either how do we plan out a maternity leave? It can look at, how do we adjust what our tasks in our business actually look like for the capacity that we have now. Maybe it looks like, do we need to be adjusting your offers or the way that you structure things? And if that is something that you would like to take advantage of, you can DM me capacity on Instagram and I will send you over the link to sign up for your capacity call. Again, this is for anyone that's never worked with me before. If you have worked with me before, you want to talk about mentorship, you want to schedule a consult call, DM me on Instagram anyways, and we will figure out what is the best fit for you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Hopefully this was helpful, and I will talk to you soon.